Welcome to Gumball Love. I'm Melissa Ledger, professional relationship coach, creator of Gumball Love and the Back to You Academy. If you're ready to stop the cycle of toxic men, get through the breakup once and for all, and finally get back to you, you are in the right place. This journey is about healing your heart, and you are encouraged to take the pace that is just right for you. In the process, you will build a foundation of confidence and strength that will make you unshakable, I promise. So get ready to level up your mindset and your lifestyle as you awaken the seeds of greatness just waiting to burst into full bloom. Let's do this. Welcome back to another episode of Gumball Love. I'm your host, Melissa Ledger, creator of Gumball Love, how to stop the cycle of sugar high romance, discover your worth, and find true love. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Jolie Moore, and she is the author of 50 First Dates. She has a podcast. She's written many romance novels, and she wrote me just as a listener and going through what she realized were all the flavors of the Gumball Guys. She wrote an amazing email how she's gone through the player, the drama king, the brat, the cheater, the victim, the rock star, the bachelor, and the skeptic, all the different Gumball Guys, all the flavors of attention. And it resonated so much that she wrote this incredible email. And I was like, I've got to meet this girl. We have to interview her. Her energy just came through in her email, and you will hear it in this podcast. She is in this, she's in the struggle. She's maybe hung up on her one last Gumball Guy. I'm going to say it's her last Gumball Guy, but I love her spirit, her, just the tone of adventure in her approach to this crazy thing of finding the love of our lives. I think it's infectious, and you're going to love listening to her story. So without further ado, here is Jolie Moore. Welcome to the show, Jolie Moore. I am so excited to have you, and I cannot wait to jump into this conversation. So first of all, say hello, Jolie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, all right. So we were chatting too much before we hit record, and I was like, all right, we've got to get this all on the podcast. So my conversation with you started to just get an email, and it was the most amazing email I think I've ever gotten, because you listed out every flavor of Gumball Guy, the definitions. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody gets it. Showed my boyfriend. He was like, oh my gosh, she's nailing it. She's getting the definitions. This is like, oh, it was so gratifying, because we'd worked so hard on all of the definitions of all the flavors of Gumball Guys. Like, not only does Gumball Love mean attention addiction, but what kind of attention? How do these guys put in the quarter to get us to give them the gumballs? And you had listed out your email. I should have just read your whole email, because it was so well written that, and I could tell you were just like, oh my gosh, I get it. So tell everybody about that experience. You said you were riding your bike you live in LA, you're riding your bike on the beach, and you're listening to the podcast, and what's happening to you in that moment.
So I ride between, for people who don't live here, basically I ride between Venice and Pacific Palisades. So it's a total about a 12-mile to 15-mile loop, usually on the weekends in the morning, just to clear my head. And also since I can't go to the gym during COVID. So I do listen to podcasts, and I was listening to it, and I sort of just wanted to pull over and take notes, which you can't do on a bike trail. Right. Because it was just, I don't even know what to say. Like, I've been listening to it, but when you had like redone your definitions, like I could plug in a guy to every single situation. So I should say that in 2019, I decided to go on 50 dates just as a way to sort of, I was getting a divorce and way to sort of throw myself back in, but I didn't want to like take it slowly, which maybe I should have. But I was like, I'm just going to meet as many people as possible. But what I didn't realize, they were all like attention seeking, not all, but let's say 90% in a whole bunch of different ways. So, you know, one guy would do X and then the next guy would do Y. And then, so I'm listening to the podcast and I'm like, oh, I dated that guy. Oh, and that guy. Oh, and that guy. Oh, and the other one too. Yes. You know, the pink one. Yes. The purple one. I did. The white one, more of those. So it was just so I can't even say, I mean, I don't normally send very long emails to people, but I was so inspired because I was like, you were talking about having changed definitions, or not changed, just sort of like solidifying. And I was like, no, she nailed it. Like, don't worry, you nailed it. Like, you 100% nailed it. I mean, you're right on point with all of them. And having gone on like 51 dates, as it were, I had like many examples of all of them.
Wow. So when you listen to it, did you see combinations of this guy was red gumball and white gumball, or red and pink? Or were you finding that you were building combinations, or did you see certain guys fitting certain colors spot on?
So yes, for both. So, I mean, this is a lot of people. So I swear to God, I think I dated one who was all of them, which is, I was like, he was just a mess. But yes. So, but some of them are really just single, like minded attention seeking, like, tell me I'm great. Tell me I'm great. Tell me I'm great. I mean, I had a guy who texted me, and I said to him, I must have said to him, in person, something about having confidence. And he texts me and he's like, well, I can't have confidence unless you tell me I'm great and tell me I'm sexy. And I was like, okay, that's a lot of work. Like, that's a lot of lifting on my part, because if you can't have confidence without somebody telling you, I don't even know what to do with that. But right. So some of them were very like single-minded, but some of them were all over the place. But yes, there were quite a few combinations.
So I get this question a lot from women that have been married, they get divorced, and they say, Melissa, I need to know what what's changed. They feel like they're out of touch and they need to reacquaint themselves with dating, what's going on, and that typical, what are the rules, and what do I need to do now in this day and age? People that maybe were married pre-social media or pre-online dating, and now they feel like they're diving into this whole world. And that was kind of you, right? Because you were married 20 years.
Yeah. So I got married in the 90s, and I woke up and was separated in like 2018. And obviously, well, not obviously, I'm sorry, I had never dated online. I had met everybody in college or graduate school. So I'd only met people in person, where there were obviously plenty of people to date. And at that time when I went to school, schools were predominantly male, especially graduate school. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing, I never had to like really look past my own nose to date anyone. Mm-hmm. And so, but I live in a huge city, and while there are a lot of people, all of my friends are married and have children and, of a certain age. So it's not as if there's a bunch of single people in my circle. I was like, well, I guess it's online dating. But apparently the women, are smarter than me, because I didn't think that far ahead. I thought, I'm older, they're older, everybody will be more adults. Like, I was just looking for like a lot more adult behavior. And I found the attention seeking not to be particularly so. So that I do wish I had thought, I wish I thought a lot of things, but yes, I get that feeling that you just want to know like what's out there and what's changed. And part of me feels like not a lot has changed except a greater exposure to more people.
Ah, I love that. Yes. Greater exposure to more people. And I feel like online dating gives the trolls so much more availability. It's like they can throw a profile up, send a message, and then so many of us feel that we have to respond to these things, that we have to respond to. I tested Ian, my love. I was like, all right, I'm going to give you, because, sometimes you'd be like, he's very much the devil's advocate, which I need in creating content. But I was like, all right, let's start with general online dating, typical responses that guys give, or how they reach out to you initially. And I think I even talked about this. And I was like, what about the guy that just says hi? And he's like, no, eliminate him right away. I'm like, just for hi. He was like, there's no effort. There's no looking at your profile. There's nothing. He didn't say anything specific like, hey, I looked at your profile and I saw this. And he's like, even if he puts together some kind of a form, maybe you can tell he could copy and paste it. At least there's some effort. But hi, right. How, letter R, letter U, exactly. And, all of those, hey, hi, beautiful, what's up? Like all of those, just like eliminate. And I think that's the biggest thing. Do you feel like after going on 51 dates, the filtering, we have to filter so much more?
So much more. I did because I didn't filter because I had no experience. So I did not know it was going to be a lot of hey, but you're right. I think what online dating does is it gives people access to me. And I don't mean this to be any pejorative, but access to me who I otherwise would not consider in my life. And then I always feel like, I don't want to just sort people out. And this is probably a women people pleasing thing, but I'm just like, I don't want to just not give them a chance just because they couldn't put together a sentence. But right. In going forward, should I get back to online dating post COVID, I would certainly filter out all of those people because it was just a waste of time. Because they were not,
so in your 51 dates, you did give them all, like, how did you do it? 51 dates. What was your method or your madness? Did you have a method, or did you just, everybody's going to want to know, like, what websites did you use, what apps, like, how did you do 51 dates?
So I had a criteria, but it was superficial. So I will tell you. So what apps I started with, I want to say I started with Bumble, but I felt that was a bit of a pressure cooker because the women have to reach out and the guys put forth even less effort. So I had to abandon that pretty quickly. And they also, I only had, I think, 2 dates from Bumble. People wanted to text and not go out. And I have no interest in texting in my house in LA. Like, I wanted to go out and do stuff because that's what I do. So that Bumble, I didn't use as much. And then I moved to Tinder because that was like fast paced. And there, I don't know, I can't speak, but my understanding is that women get a lot, men swipe right on everything. So you would sign in and you'd have like 50 to 100 matches a day. And so that filtering, even that was so much work. So we'd start there, and then I would filter based on my criteria of looks. And oh my God, it was like cute and like in a creative industry. Like, I did not have as good of a filter as I should have had.
Cute and creative. There you passed. Okay.
And then after that, so say I swiped right on them, and then I would reach out to some people if I thought that they were going to be a match and not reach out. So how can I don't want, this is going to sound awful, but better looking guys, I would reach out to, because I figured they would probably have a huge number of matches. And that worked. And because I could obviously write a better sentence and be a little bit more forthcoming. But other things, I would wait until they reached out. But I'm going to be honest, like, achieving 51 dates is not difficult. I live in like a city of like 4 million, like the metropolitan area has 10 million. And so I think I could go on like a day to day if I really wanted to, but that is not a quality method of doing it. And I would filter much better in the future. But yes, there was a lot of how are you? And I really tried hard because I would read, and especially, this is probably not a good idea, but I would read a lot of men who gave dating advice, and they were like, well, you have to strike up a conversation because men can't do that. Or, if you have if you have a certain percentage match, then you've got to reach out and ask them out because they're not going to do it. And what I didn't realize, and I kept thinking, okay, well, I'll do that. But when they didn't put forth any effort initially, they literally never put forth any effort. I have never seen such low effort in my life. I can't even tell you.
Okay, so you're saying if they didn't put forth effort in the beginning, then you never saw it later on, even if you took the initiative.
Correct. So they would not plan a date. I mean, even people who really wanted to date me, like who were very heavily in pursuit, I'd be like, okay, great. Well, let's meet. And they'd be like, well, where do you want to meet? And so at the beginning, I was just like, meet near my house because I don't have to go very far. And, traffic in LA, I'm going to be honest, was like, I was like, and I live in I live in a walkable area where there's a lot of restaurants and coffee shops and a park and everything. So I was like, well, meet near me. But then they'd be like, well, what time? I'd be like, well, I have a lot more time because I'm a writer and I'm flexible, but I'm like, well, if you have a job or something, what time works for you? And, they just really couldn't. I don't think picking a restaurant and a time and a day is like a huge thing, but most of the people I went out with couldn't do that.
Why do you think that is? Just curious of although you dated 51, you went on these 51 dates, and maybe you feel like you could have done it differently, but you still now have that research, you have that data. Right. So why do you think there's such low effort?
I think with online dating, maybe they don't have to. Because they have access to more women than they otherwise would. So if I don't make a plan for dinner or coffee or tea or whatever it is, I think that they would just swipe and move it to the next person who'd be willing to say, let's meet at the Starbucks on the corner of Santa Monica Boulevard at 4 p.m.
Right.
Otherwise, yeah.
So it gets back to when you respect yourself, you respect your own time,
right,
and then you respect other people's time. And so when these guys don't respect their own time, they don't respect you. You know what I mean? It's
yes, exactly.
It follows through, right? It just shows that if I don't respect myself, I don't respect others. And so that's where, when you have that, you have the desire to meet quality people, have quality dates, have interesting conversations, because that's what you're doing on a daily basis. So
Right.
it's even more proof that if you're not doing that, then like you said, if they didn't show it in the beginning, you never saw it manifest. So all that dating advice, you never
Mhm.
saw it manifest like, oh yeah,
No.
I put forth effort. Then they really kicked into gear and no, you never saw it.
No, I never saw it. And so that dating advice, I remember, so I took a break halfway through. I travel a lot. So I usually travel for the summer. So in 2019, I still could travel. So I went away for the summer. And that's when I started like taking in more dating advice. I was like, okay, well, 6 months in, what I was doing is not necessarily working. Let me take in some more information. And the information was, well, if women just do X, or if women just do Y, or if women just do Z, then the man will know you're interested. Then they'll put forth effort. And that was a lot of the dating advice I got. I mean, not got, I looked, I don't want to say Google dating advice, but I listened to a lot of different people. And there are, I don't know if dating advice is predominated by men, but that's certainly what I initially took in. And it was a lot of, oh, if you just tell us, then we'll step up.
Or if you just tap into the man's deep desire to be the hero, be
Exactly.
the
Yes.
like get into that. And when I say this to men, it's like that are, happily married and I'll just say, what do you think? They just stare at you like they don't know what their deep desire is to really pursue, like whatever that caveman is. Like if they want, it does get down to, we do go after what we want.
Right.
But do you not agree that these people that aren't taking action, they don't really know what they want? So when they're presented with an option, it's not there's not that drive to pursue it because
Right. So
they don't understand that might be what they're looking for.
right. And I don't want to like lump them all into, but I will say that I think that they're single for a reason. So, they're like, oh, I want to have a relationship. And so I'm kind of chatty and I don't have sufficient boundaries sometimes. So I would spend like 2 or 3 hours with these people because I do love talking to people. And I'm also a writer. So part of it's just freaking fascinating, and I would spend like 2, 3 hours with people and they'd be like, well, I want a relationship. And I'm like, well, what are you doing, to do that? And they're like, I don't know. I got a cat and, I watch TV and I hang out in my backyard. And I'm like, okay, but that's not what you want. Or to me, it actually is what they want, but that's a different conversation. But they didn't have any idea what they want. I think they just wanted like companionship, but they didn't have a sense of what that involved. And for me, I was pretty clear. I was like, well, I want to go to the theater because I grew up in New York City. So I used to go to the theater and I still go here. It's a little different, but I'm like, I want to go to the theater and I like to eat out and I like to go to different events. And I'm pretty clear on what my life involves. And they didn't even seem clear on what they wanted in a person or what they even wanted in their life.
I know it just goes back to, this is why I created the Back to You Academy. It's not going back to a previous version of who you were, but it's getting back to understanding who you are and knowing what you actually need and want.
Right.
So let me ask you this, because you spent 20 years in a marriage that was not right for you, right? It did not meet your needs.
Not at all.
So, yeah. So, but you seem like, how did you figure out, or how did you know to then start figuring this out? Or did you already kind of know what you wanted and needed? You just knew it wasn't your ex?
Both. So I had I want to say this, I had a personality. I had a whole life before I got married. And I thought that my ex, to be honest, would come along with me. And he was not that person. He would rather, he had a lot of anxiety. So every time I'd leave the house, he was like, don't die in a car accident. So he didn't go out much. And that was a lot. So I would go out on my own. I mean, I have a ton of friends and, we go out to dinner, we go out to lunch, we, do all these things. And so I knew what I wanted. The mistake I made, and actually my therapist pointed this out, is that I needed to know what I wanted in a guy. I knew what I wanted, the kind of lifestyle I want to live. I'm very clear on that, but I needed to know what I wanted in a person. And I hadn't thought about a person sort of matching my level of energy or wanting to live the same kind of lifestyle I did. So, I mean, I travel a lot, well, pre-COVID. And so I think I had a guy on one of the dating apps respond to me because I put one of my things on my thing is like part-time jet setter. And he responded to me. He's like, well, how are you going to meet someone? He's like, the majority of Americans don't have a passport. And I responded to him like, well, I'm not interested in dating those people necessarily. I mean, if they're willing to travel with me, sure, or they're willing to get a passport, sure. But I would prefer somebody who already has an interest in that. I'm not willing to like cut my travel to meet a guy.
Right.
And so it was just a matter of knowing what I want. But I still was not necessarily discerning, probably some self-esteem issues that I just didn't think I can meet somebody who would meet my criteria, to be frank. And I'm starting to feel my criteria now that I think about it a lot more. I've had all of 2020 to think a lot about it, is a little more filtered than it was initially. So things that are important to me are like having a job. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like having a job and having savings and having a retirement plan and like knowing what you like to do. So I want a man who knows what he likes to do. Like the last guy I dated seriously for like a few months in the beginning of 2020, like I would ask him like, what do you want to eat? Well, my wife, well, she wasn't his ex yet, but that's a whole conversation. Different conversation. He sort of lied a lot, well, she likes to have sushi. So let's go to that place. I'm like, so we live in a city that has like a gazillion restaurants. And the only one you can think of is your wife's favorite,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, what do you like to do? And he was like, well, I don't really know. And he claimed to have a lot of interests, which were similar to mine, but that was about him sort of like gerrymandering my profile so that he could date me. But it was, yeah, I know he did that. He admitted it later, but that's a different conversation. Like he saw my profile, changed his to match mine.
Gerrymandering his profile. That is a new one. Oh my God. I love it.
Well, he did say at some point, he said, I decided that I was going to stop lying to get into relationships, but I didn't this time. But look, it worked. At which point I was out the door. But
wow.
So it was just, I just want somebody who like has, and also who has their own interests. So even that guy that I dated, I call him the foreigner. I have like nicknames for all of them. And he was like, oh, I have a lot of interests. And I was like, okay, well, let's hang out for the weekend. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to write for a couple hours and then I'm going to talk to a friend over Zoom. And then I'm going to do this like Zoom meeting with authors that we do on the weekend. And he was like, oh, okay, I have plenty to do. And his plenty to do would be like sitting there looking at me. I was like, oh God, I was married to this guy. I can't do this anymore. Like you really need to have your own friends and your own interests and stuff that you like to do. And we can come together, but you need to have like a whole life. And that was also not a criteria. So it's just that
I feel like you figured all of this out, like from when you got divorced. How long have you been divorced total? Is it 3 years almost?
I left 31 months ago. I count the months.
Not that we're counting, but yes, we are counting 31 months. Okay. So you've been divorced 31 months. And how would you say your mindset was 31 months ago compared to now?
Oh my God. So 31 months ago, I was like, well, my ex didn't really like me, which is its own conversation. He wanted me around all the time, but then would nitpick everything I did. And I just so I was like, oh, well, maybe there's people out there who like me. So it was a little, I don't know, maybe my own attention seeking, but I just was, it just seemed unbelievable that people would sort of date me. So I didn't have the highest bar, but it did take me. So, you dated the guy who never showed up. Okay. So maybe I need to date somebody who shows up. I dated the guy who like lied about being married, a couple of those. Okay. So I need to check that in the beginning. So it's just, the criteria, unfortunately, is sort of defensive. It was sort of like, oh no, not that. And I have to cross that out. Oh no, not that. I have to cross that out. And then also being more, focused on seeking what I wanted as opposed to accepting what was out there. I felt like I just had to, because I don't want to be like, I don't know. I grew up on the East Coast and so polite, and you just don't want to dismiss people out of hand. It's like, well, you should give people a chance. And I do believe that, but giving people a chance is not accepting anybody who asks me out.
Right. I think that as women, we apply these, give everybody a chance and we feel mean, we feel rude. Right. However, it's kind of like if we went to a car lot and it was like, oh, are you going to drive all of the cars because you want to give them all a chance? You're going to be like, I think that car is ugly. I don't even care what the inside looks like. Right. And we have to get that specific because finding a life partner is a lot bigger deal than a car. But we end up being pickier about things that aren't even going to last. And then when it comes to, it's like online dating to me is like trying to talk to every guy in a bar. You're not going to do it. You're going to avoid, in person, we can avoid eye contact or we can say, no, thank you. Like you're going to get away from that gross clinger guy because you don't feel like you need to talk to him in person. But then if he sends you an email, it says, hi, what, all of a sudden we're like, oh God, do I, and you look at his pictures. I mean, I've done it. I felt sorry for him. And then
Yes.
and then you're like, well, I don't want to let him down because I don't want no, I'm rejecting you immediately. So I would sit there and think how do I deal with this guy that just said hi to me? Maybe he's hoping for a response back. He's sitting there. Maybe I'm the only girl he talked to. I would create all these things. Okay, I need to feel sorry for this
Exactly.
guy. Yeah. Oh God, what if he just, or the guy that's like, I know you're probably getting all these emails and you're so beautiful and I probably don't have a chance, but I'll be like, oh God, this guy is he's pathetic, but he's just hoping that I'll say something. And then you're like, it's okay to say no or to ignore and block people and never respond, because otherwise we're driving every car on the lot and we're only going to buy the one we saw when we first came in. You know what I mean? We have to get that specific.
No, you're so right. I mean, the thing is, and I hate to say this, but I'm really discerning about everything else in my life. I'm very discerning about cars. I just bought new towels. I'm really specific about the towels. It has to be a certain size and a certain thing. And I'm like, I got to get these Turkish towels with this weight. And I'm really discerning about everything in my life. And then this is the one place I was like, oh, but I don't want to reject them, or I should give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And that makes in retrospect, it makes no sense.
So I will tell you that this loving, open, forgiving person you are, that energy is so well received in a healthy relationship. And so I always remind every one of my girls that the way we naturally are, however, all of the women that are attracted to Gumball Love and relate to this concept, I think we have a we're all kind of people pleasers. We're all giving too much because we're big givers. And now when I'm in a relationship where all of my giving is so appreciated and it's appreciated all the time. And I've really realized how much I give, yet he's a big giver as well. And so when you have that energy and it can be received in the right container, so to speak, and someone goes, wow, every time you give, they're like, oh my gosh, wow, this is so incredible. So many times I've thought, man, I would give in similar ways in the past. And it was just completely disregarded, overlooked, mocked, made fun of. And now the love of my life is so grateful. And we appreciate each other every single day. And so that's the energy that we can hold on to, but we have to raise our standard and know that energy is reserved for the most special and precious people in our lives. So anyway, just as a side note. So, okay. First of all, Jolie, I love your energy and your enthusiasm through this, because I want all my girls to kind of harness this energy. You seem, and maybe it's just your bubbly personality, but it seems like you're able to just kind of navigate this and not let a lot of it get to you. Is that accurate? Or have you had some, I mean, I know it's been painful too, but
Right.
how do you maintain such a good attitude about it?
That's, it's something I wonder every day. So my therapist says I'm really resilient. I can bounce back from pretty much anything.
Yeah.
I have no idea because you have those friends who are like, well, there's nobody out there, so you might as well just get 3 cats and call it a day. And I always look at them, I'm like, but there's so many people and people are nice and generous. And my life experience has been pretty much that people are delightful. And I just have to find a delightful person. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to be honest, 2 of these guys, 3 of them, kind of got me down. They really affected me. And because I was investing way more in them, well, for 2 of them than they were in me. I'll describe it this way. At some point I was loading my dishwasher or something, and he was standing in the kitchen. He was talking about, he had a bunch of affairs in his marriage. And I was like, oh, that's not acceptable. I don't know what I said. It probably was not the most positive reception. Yeah. And he said, well, given how you described your marriage, I'm surprised that you didn't have an affair. And I thought, do you think I'm not a person of integrity? So that got me down, because I was like, and I know he was projecting, but it was just awful to stand there with somebody who would lie and cheat and do all these things, and somehow saw me as an equivalent. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not that person. I'm really honest and straightforward, and, I'll tell you like it is. And I don't cheat. I don't cheat. I don't quit. There's a lot of things that are important to me, and him seeing himself reflected in me was horrible. And then the other guys that got me down is one who just would never show up. And I didn't know this was a thing. He would text me, I want to spend time with you. We had a great first date, and Then so he went away. Like he was a traveler. So he flew to, I don't know, somewhere in Central America. And when he came back, he was like, he would text me every day on his trip. And then he's like, it was such a great first date. I can't wait to see you. And the day that we're supposed to meet for the second date, he blows me off. And then I went out with him afterwards. And that was the hugest mistake. And so I spent 5 months in that pattern where he'd be like, I can't wait to see you. And he would show up 50% of the time. And that really got me. Like, I was like, oh my God, am I not even worth showing up like all of the time? You know, so he'd be like, oh, let's hang out for the weekend. And then he wouldn't text me until Tuesday. And as if nothing had ever happened.
So what Gumball Guy do you think he is if you were to put him in the...
So he's in a bunch of categories, to be frank, but I think that he was the chase me.
I was hoping you would say that. Classic chase me. Right.
Class.
So what do you think his issue was? Why wasn't he showing up? I mean, I think this is probably the most epidemic problem in online dating or just in dating in general is that emotionally unavailable guy, right? So
right.
Why
And of course
he wasn't showing up?
I have tried. So I've put a lot of thought into it, but you know, at some point I quit the thought. One of my friends said, well, she thinks it's because he didn't have a lot of money. And so he was like ashamed of that. He couldn't like take me places or do things. And he's one guy, I never saw his place. And so that was weird. So that may have been a factor, but I can't fix that for him. You know what I mean? Like that's if he wants to do something or be more ambitious or change his life, that's on him. The other was I spent too much. I couldn't pinpoint it. Like the other day I was biking and I thought, was he just a drug dealer? And I didn't know it. Like I couldn't figure out like why he had like 2 phones and couldn't show up and all of these things he would say, but I don't know. I think he had basically a low self-worth. I'm going to be honest. Like the more I talk to him and I will chat with people a lot. So, I mean, we would sit down and we would talk for like 6 or 7 hours, and he grew up poor and his mom didn't really love him and all of these things. And I think he just had a low self-worth. And I think he just didn't think that he could like run with me, and that's fine. But then
I feel like I could write a whole book. Maybe you can write this book about the men that do not feel good enough for women, yet they pursue you at that halfway. Because I just coached 2 different girls. I get text messages from girlfriends are like, okay, this is what's happening. And one of them is very, very successful. She has a huge brand. And I said, I think this guy's intimidated by you. I think that he is threatened by your success. And we hear this a lot. And that's what makes us as strong, successful women feel like, okay, now I need to shrink. I need to make myself smaller. There's something about me that's making this guy afraid or hesitant. So then he's not showing up. Like you said, I was dating the guys that aren't showing up or showing up for half the time. And this can kill you because
I even tell you, no, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
Like on one podcast, you were talking about showing up with a designer purse. So I like designer purses. I have an expensive car. I'm going to be honest, but I'm an adult. I've paid for it. Like I'm not asking people for money. And at some point I started taking Uber so I wouldn't show up with the car, because I would show up with the car and they'd be like, oh, why do you have that car? And I live in LA. Okay. So there's like a ton of luxury cars. Like it's not the only person driving down the street.
Right.
But I would start taking Uber to the car. I switched out my purses. Like I would take all my stuff out of my purse and put it in like a little tiny purse so that I wouldn't bring the expensive purse. And I would like dial down the clothes or dial down the jewelry or whatever. And I was like, at some point I was like, this is like a lot. Like this is a lot to just like save his ego, whoever he is.
Yeah. And you're stripping yourself down to a shell version of yourself. This isn't who you are.
Right. But I like a cute person. I really love my car. You know what I mean? Like, and I bought it because I liked it. And I mean, it's the 4th or 5th one I've had, but I mean, it's just like, I like the car, I like all the plug-in stuff in the car or whatever, because I spent a lot of time in my car, and it was just like, why do I have to do that? But even the guy that I'm still involved with now, we were sitting maybe a few weeks ago, because he's been out of town, but we were sitting on my couch and he looks behind me and he goes, you've written so many books, because they're on my mantle, the fireplace mantle. Because let me say this, I decided to display them because it makes me feel good and it makes it easier to write on days when I don't feel like writing. So I put them on the mantle with some candles, and like a little like love thing, women. And he's sitting there, he's a film director. And he's sitting there, he goes, but I've only done 1 feature film and you've written all those books. And he said it out loud. And I thought, but we're not, I'm not comparing myself. Like, we're not in comparison. I've made 0 feature films. Like, what,
Right.
I don't, okay. But he sort of says things like that from time to time, which lead me to believe that he's somewhat intimidated.
And you cannot have that. And let me tell you, like I have realized, trust me, I've always been a successful, I've had a successful career and got, gained more and more success over the years. But I was always insecure inside. And so I never allowed myself to really acknowledge that success. And I spent probably almost all of my 20s. No, not probably. I spent all of my 20s trying to hide it.
Right.
Because I remember one family member found out that I made a 6-figure income, my early 20s, and announced it at a Thanksgiving table. And I became, ever since that day, it literally changed my brand and people felt weird around me. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to do with that. I thought, do you think I think I'm better than you? And then it put me into people pleaser mode even more because I thought, no, don't look at me that way. I mean, I would think, yes, that is a lot of money, but in reality, after taxes, started to realize, yeah, $100,000. I mean, it is nice, but depending on the lifestyle you're leading, it's not the lottery. And so I started to see how people would respond to me. And that was the beginning of shrinking myself. And as I grew out of that, and I started to surround myself with more successful people, men, women, and we could exchange stories on a peer level. Right. Then I started to see that it wasn't that it made those people bad, but they were intimidated. They couldn't hang. They couldn't handle. I was dealing with jealousy. Anytime you're dealing with jealousy, you can't have jealousy present, even in a girl friendship. Like if I sense, sometimes I really like a girl and I'm like, oh, maybe she could be one of my friends. I'm really liking her. But then I sense jealousy and I'm like, damn, I really like her. She's so awesome, but I can't have a jealous friend. Like it's just not going to work. And so when you have a guy that's jealous or threatened, it has nothing to do with you, with how they feel about themselves. They're feeling lack in their career about who they are, whatever. And there's nothing we can do to change how accomplished they feel in the world. And so if you feel tasked with that, then you're doing all the things. You're like, oh, I'm going to hide the car. I got to hide the jewelry. I got to hide the purse. Can I talk about books that I've published? I mean, it's never ending.
No, I'm going to be honest. I had a similar experience it was like at the beginning of 2000s with a family thing. So because I did an article in the paper about, there's a financial person in LA who does like financial planning for people publicly. And I did the article in the paper. And when my family found out how much money I was making, they were like, well, why are you going so fast? Do you think you should be doing that? Like there was so much condemnation around it that I actually stopped talking about it. I never talked about it again. Like I never, ever talked about any like promotions or anything that ever happened that was about success. So I had to like minimize myself in that context. And then dating has been exactly the same way. So I've stopped doing that, but I'm actually not dating actively except for the one guy, but like I've stopped doing that. But even this guy, like today, so he came by today, I'm not even going to get into it because I've let him, because I've decided, he says to me, I can't believe this is so horrible. He says to me like a few weeks ago, he said, so we reached the level in our relationship where I think I can ask you for a favor. And I was like, okay, what do you need? Right. And he was like, can I park my car at your place? Because he got a car. I'm not even going to get into it. And then has no parking for it in LA. And I asked him about it a year and a half ago. And he said he had a solution. And to be honest, never thought about it again. And I was like, okay, so he's been gone for a month on location or whatever. So he picked up the car this morning and he said, do you want to get together this weekend? And I said, sure. And he was like, your response is sure. And I was like, what do I even say? This is a guy who, after a year of dating, said to me, I said, well, I think I want to have a more serious relationship. And he said, I'm not interested in you in that way. And then this morning, I was not sufficiently enthusiastic about like hanging out on Saturday, like yeah, sure. And I looked at him, I go, well, I'd be delighted to hang out with you. I was like, but this is the person who's turned me down and I spend time with him despite that. And yet I'm not sufficiently enthusiastic for him. I was so mad at myself.
Yeah, it's like, because you didn't give enough. That's an interesting. It wasn't wasn't a gumball enough. Wasn't sweet. It wasn't intense enough. Didn't get him high. So yeah, you got yourself another gumball.
I know, I know, I know, I
But
know.
I wanted you on this podcast because, everybody wants to hear, for a long time I did this podcast and I was single and I was still going through the dating process. And thank God I still listened to what I had to say because you're in the trenches, you're in the moment, you're learning, you're growing, you're up against the challenges. And even though you know the red flags, your heart gets in it and then you
Right.
work through it. So there's that point where, okay, I'm seeing these flags. I understand what's going on. And now I have to look at these guys differently or this particular guy differently that's in your
Hmm.
life right now.
Right.
And you're already doing it. And you're doing it in I agree with your therapist. You're very resilient, very healthy in the way you're approaching it. You remind me of one of my favorite quotes. I wish I knew who said it. It's let the spirit of adventure set the tone.
Oh, wow. I like that.
I feel like you're on this adventure. And so of course, you're human and you have emotions, but
Right.
you're also able to kind of take that 30,000-foot view and take a step back and see things and not get so bogged down in all of those details. But, sounds like this one's got a little bit of your heart. So
Oh,
got some work to do with this one.
this one, I don't know why. So I met him, oh my God, in January of 2019.
Mm.
And I really like him. I mean, he's other than all of his issues, he's very cute. Other than all of those, no, he's actually good looking and he's really funny and smart and like resourceful and all these things. He got me vaccinated in March. I mean, like he was like, I'm going to find out a way to get us vaccinated. I was like, go you, but I don't have that kind of time. And he did it. So, I
Wow.
mean, I can't like, I know. So, I mean, he has like some great qualities, but one of the things I think he's really struggling with, which he has said out loud, like he's worried about not being successful. He grew up poor, which I don't know what to do with that because I did not. And he's like 44. He lives in a studio apartment, like around the corner from me. That's a different conversation because I didn't realize the apps were like geographically centric. So of course, like he's like less than a mile from my house. I run into him from
Wow.
time to time in public and I stopped dating in my neighborhood for that reason. But I'm not at all kidding. I didn't want to run into him on Melrose, to be frank. So
I love how like all these comments are like entire conversations that we don't get into, but it's like, oh my God, there's so many like little trails of adventure we could go on with each comment. So okay, continue.
right. But so he's great, but I was dating other people at the time because he said to me on the first day we met, I was like, are you interested in a relationship? I wasn't asking with me. I just meant in general. And he was like, he said, I call him Thunderbolt, both in my book and in my life, but he said to me, oh, I'm waiting to meet the perfect woman. And then I'm like, how will you know it's the case? And he's like, oh, like, I'll feel like a thunderbolt hit me. And I looked at him, I thought, okay, so you're not available, but you're a lot of fun. And so we hung out, but then he got wackadoodle weird. He was like, you're dating other people. I'm like, you don't want to date me. This is the first month I met him. I was like, if you don't want to date, you just want to casually hang out and have fun, I'm all on board because you're a lot of fun. But he got weird. He's like, well, every time we'd see each other, he's like, so are you still dating that guy? Are you dating this other guy? What are you doing? I was like, this is really none of your business,
Mhm.
But he got all jealous. Then he went through a period. He didn't talk to me for like 6 weeks. And then one day he calls me and I was like, I honestly thought I would never hear from you again. He's like, no, I'm over it. So, whatever. So for months and months and months, we dated, but I do travel a lot and he travels a lot. So I would see him, but I did see him basically every week. And at some point, like in between October of that first year, so we'd been dating for like 10 months. And I said to him, I feel like I like you a lot. You act as if you like me a lot, whatever. Are you interested in dating? And he was like, no, I want to keep this casual. I said, fine. So, and then December, I got all like, I don't know, schmoopy, as you say, schmoopy. I don't know what happened. I was like, I gotta do this. So in December of 2019, I said, okay, I'm seriously want to have this conversation with you. I'm interested in dating you. Like, seriously, is that something you're in? And I'm still mad about this. I can't believe it. He looked at me, he goes, well, sometimes women catch feelings, And I was like, okay. So I think we're done and you gotta go. And he goes into this long speech about how he's so great. And I was like, he's like, well, I'm great looking and I'm really smart and I'm really funny and all these other things. I said, this is true, but you're not interested in dating me. So I don't understand what we're doing and you got to go. And he's like literally at my back door. He's like, so do you mean we're not going to see each other anymore? And I was like, yes, because you're not interested in dating. Like, I thought it was pretty clear. And then I didn't hear from him for weeks. I started dating another guy. And of course he pops right back up. Like, just when I'm like, oh, I think I'm over him. He calls one day and he's like, do you want to hang out? And I said yes. And I've never done that before. I've always closed the door on people. And I don't know what happened. And I said yes. And then he was back. And I was like, we saw each other once in February. And I was like, no, I can't do this. So I thought I was pretty good. And I had all these rules that I regret, but I had all these rules around it. I'm not going to text him. I'm not going to call him. I'm not going to do any of these things. But he still reached out all the time. So if he said, oh, I was hiking, what do you think about Mandeville Canyon? I would comment on that. Or he's like, I went to this place on Melrose. What do you think about that? And I would comment on that, but I was not that interested in having a further conversation. But some point in 2020, I lost my ability to discern. And he texted me about something. And I texted him back and I said, look, I don't understand what's going on here. I said, are you interested in like seeing me and like starting up again? Or are you interested in talking about movies and hiking and things to do during COVID? Because if you're having that second conversation, then I'm more than willing to have it. And he took 2 days to respond. In which point he said, that's a safe assumption. That's what he said. I'm still, oh God. And then we're back.
And now you're back. Okay. Yeah. So look, I think every woman listening can relate to, there's something about that guy. There's always a somebody, this whole Gumball Love concept would be so easy if they didn't get under our skin, or they didn't get into, so there's something about him that's reeling you back in. However, you are giving, so when you were describing that dynamic of, hey, okay, I'm going to let you go because you're not interested in dating me, but he still wants you to chase him. So he wants the pursuit. He likes the feeling of you validating him.
Right.
He's not willing to give you any of the things that are the commitment things. So I asked my significant other, I said, what are the demands that I can expect from you without even like expectations I can have regardless? Like, these are just things I can have. And I'm trying to pull this up as you're talking, because I think that when we're in relationships with these kinds of guys, we forget what a healthy, great relationship will actually offer us.
No, so this is so interesting because I had this exact conversation with my therapist this week. Because, every week she's like, you're still with the guy? I was like, I mean, it's not quite like, she's not that glib, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I looked, she's like, I've been asking you for years what it is you want. And I finally answered her. And she was like, that's not a lot to ask. You want him to show up. You want him to like care about what you're doing. You want him to be upfront. And I mean, I said this to this guy like a few weeks ago, because he asked me something. He texted me something. And I was like, are you asking if we want to spend time together? Or are you just like texting, hey? It wasn't hey, but whatever it was. And he was like, no, I want to spend time with you. I'm like, well, why can't you just say that? Like, why is it so hard for you to say that? It's not like we're both adults. It's not like it doesn't need to be a black box mystery every time you reach out.
Right.
So, but I want somebody who is clear. Like even like a few weeks ago, he asked me something and I said, I was like, this is like all jumbled up. I'm like, what do you want? He was like, well, I want to like come over and I want to do this and I want to do that. And then I want to do this other thing. And I was like, why can't you just say that? Like, why do I have to like pull this out of you every time? If you want this, then why don't you say this? But that said, I don't think he's not consistent. And that's the biggest thing. It's a thing that drives me crazy. It's like a few weeks ago, he was traveling and he asked to park in my space. He comes and picks up the keys and he was like, oh, he's like, do you want to get together this weekend? But I knew he was in that shutdown mode because he's got 2 modes, like schmoopy and shutdown. And he was in shutdown mode. And I was like, I'm not going to see him. And then the minute like he realized that, like, I don't know, it took him a minute. I don't know what he did over the weekend, to be honest. And then on Tuesday or whatever day, he texted me and he was like, oh, can we hang out? And I was like, I have a child, my custody schedule. It's not some mystery. When you need to know it, you can remember it. And, I can't do this on weekdays. I can only, be on weekends. And he was like, oh, I'm so sad about it. And I was like, what? But no, we all have that guy. And I've never had one in my life. I've been really good at cutting people out. And this one,
he's like a chase me, pity me, me. And then when you turn me down, then I'm going to be sad. And then when he comes over, do you feel like you have to entertain him?
No. So he comes over. No. So he's actually, okay, 75% of the time he's good. Like he comes over. But one of the things, it's like he wants a relationship. Like he has friends, but it's COVID. So, I mean, I know there's fewer like interactions, but he comes over and it's like he downloads. He's like, well, he wants to tell me everything like about his life. So he spends like the first couple hours like telling me everything. Well, this is what's happening with the movie I'm producing. And this is what's going on with my mom and my brother. And like, everything. We talked about his grandmother and her teeth, like all these things. and he sort of wants to download and, well, maybe
And
it is
can
that
you do
thing.
the same with him?
I don't know. So I will say this, and I know this, and I've never said this to him. I'm pretty guarded, especially now, mainly because, so he said to me a few weeks ago, he's like, I feel like I don't get to know a lot about you. And all I can think of is, well, I would tell you more, but you've already rejected me. So what am I going to get from telling you more?
Which is a valid point, because
Right.
I can't have my list here. These are the things that the love of my life said. This is what I can demand. We were driving to Tennessee for a little like weekend getaway. And he said, showing up, emotional availability, consistency, unconditional love, patience, kindness, and non-transactional. Obviously, this comes from us working on Gumball Love, but
Right.
what we're Gumball Love is essentially transactional relationships based on a transaction where somebody gets a payoff.
Right.
So it's like when you look at how these guys and look, when you're hearing about their life and you're hearing about their story and you're hearing about grandma and her teeth, it's like, hey, well, maybe this guy, he has some depth. He's not a serial killer. He's not a psychopath.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you're like, okay, I like this guy. You're trying to make when they show up work, but then there's so much of a percentage where they don't show up.
Right.
And so then you're left abandoned in those times.
Right. And that's when I'm sitting at home, like feeling so sorry for myself. It happened for a couple of weeks ago when he didn't show up. And I thought, I can't believe I'm walked down this road again. Like I just walked down the road. It wasn't like a blind turn. It wasn't like it was unknown. I walked down the road again. But the list you're saying is exactly it's pretty much word for word the list I gave to my therapist. I'm like, this is what I want. And she was like, this is not a high bar to clear. She's like, that is the minimum. She's like, and then the theater or the traveling or the, adventures, that's a separate issue. She was like, but that's the minimum.
Yes, it is the minimum. And man, I had no idea. I learned this very late in life, but I think for me personally, I was destined to teach this. And so I know so many women spend in their 20s and their 30s and they're freaked out and they think they're never going to find love. But I really think we find love when we find our own value and we know how high to set that bar and we stop giving time to guys that are not giving us all of these things.
Right.
It doesn't make them a bad person, but what we feel bad for rejecting the guy because you've already talked about grandma and her teeth in the film, and it's like those things matter though. It's like, God, I've spent all this time talking to this guy. I mean, now you're over a year in, right? So this is a great example of, damn, like think about what you like, but also how this is what, and I want you to take this, like how much more time does this guy get of your life?
Right.
And because there's, I can tell you, you're not going to miss out on anything with this guy because he's not coming to the relationship, giving you what you deserve and what you actually need. And this gets back to what we actually need. This is not, oh, I need a guy who's supportive and loving. Like, no, I want every girl listening, including you, my dear. I want you to think about what do I actually need? And I'll tell you, like, I started thinking, I need a guy that can support me with Gumball Love. I need a guy who can deal with a woman who's talking about relationships and guys that suck every day. Like, can I find that? I used to think like, man, this is going to be tough. And people would ask me, Melissa, is it hard to date when doing what you do? And it's like, yeah, it kind of is because I have to spend time trying to get to know the guy before I reveal this other side of my business. And then but I started admitting the things, and we've talked about this on previous episodes. So I started admitting the things like, I need somebody that I small things. I want somebody who will help me walk the dogs. So he walks my dogs every day now. And like, I wanted help carrying things. I got tired of doing things by myself. I could do them. I was happy being single, but I knew I didn't want to stay single. I started to think, I need a companion. I need a man for all of these things. And I made a list of what I felt like a man could support me in actual real needs. Not that we need a man. We, all of the feminists that I give shit to that are watching 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
Don't call yourself a feminist if you're watching 50 Shades of Grey. No, I'm just kidding. I'm like, really? Like, you want this guy to be so feminine, yet you're watching 50 Shades because the guy is super masculine. Well, kind of. I have a whole rant about him. It makes him not masculine, but it gives the illusion, right? There's this fantasy of this masculine guy that's going to come in and be
Save
that
the day and swoop in. Yeah.
and swoop in and save the day. And so we over fantasize, and you're a fantasy writer. So,
Right.
you know this world. However, we have to get to a point where we can enjoy fantasy for what it is, but also adjust our expectations, because showing up and emotional availability and consistency isn't going to give you the high and the rush of wondering, like the high with the guy you're with now for
Right.
you. There's an unknown. There's a mystery.
Call them the black box mystery. You're going to open it and who knows what you're going to get today.
Yeah. And there's an excitement there. And there's a little bit of a rush of, ooh, he chose me today out of all these other choices. Because the chase me guy we've nicknamed the Bachelor, where it feels like he has this buffet of choices. And when he chooses you, that's exciting.
Right.
And so we get a high off of being chosen, yet then we have to deal with the low of being ignored for those periods of times where you go days or weeks, or even sometimes several hours can feel like forever.
Right.
And so I can tell you, after, I've been with my guy, we're going on 2 years. I've never gone any amount of time where I'm like wondering where he is or what's happening. Never.
Right.
But that could be really boring if I was with Gumball Guy after Gumball Guy, and it's like, oh, this guy just shows up consistently. But let me tell you, consistency gets super sexy when you understand what you need, what you want. And it's like this constant calm water that's just so soothing, because life is where the inconsistency is.
Oh, I know. Like my work
what I
and
mean?
all the stuff that you have to deal with every day.
Yeah. You don't want your significant other to be all over the place. You need your solid relationships to be, stable.
Right.
And so you can ride the craziness of life. I mean, we turn on the news, it's like, now there's a gas shortage and who knows what else. It's like, how can we have more freaking problems? It's so crazy. It's like, so I don't need any of that craziness in our relationship. So I admire you so much, A, for coming on this podcast, B, for going through 51 dates, and just going in and being like, I'm just going to try and do all the things and see what happens and try the apps, because I know so many people will be listening to this and feeling like, okay, I got to peek into what it's like. Right. And you're still in the process, but you are in the process with awareness.
Yes,
you're
that's so much better.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I started blind, and I don't know if I could have done it differently. Like I always want to go back, but I don't know if I could have done it differently. But having awareness feels like it'll be better going forward. So I think I might travel this summer. I don't know. That's an open question right now. But if I can, I think I want to spend some time just, thinking about life, and then come back in the fall or whatever with a new perspective and the ability to just be more discerning. Like, it's okay I'm so sorry that they don't get any dates, but that's not my problem to solve.
Yes. So if you had to wrap this up, I think that if I think of my audience, I think of so many women out there that have just gotten divorced. They're going through a breakup. They've been out of the online dating game and all of the apps. So if you could go back in time and start from where you were, what would you tell that girl?
Oh my God, be discerning. Just be discerning. So, I mean, I have some discernment. If they're holding a gun or they're holding a fish or something, that wasn't working or holding their car, like their Bentley or their, Lamborghini or whatever, then I was like, clearly that's your best friend and that's okay, but you're not going to be mine. So I would be way, way, way more discerning. And I think I would only put effort into men who put effort into me. And I don't mean the love bombing effort that I got one of those, but not that. But somebody who is genuinely interested, as opposed to just going along because it's Tuesday.
I love it. Jolie, I could talk to you literally all day. You are the guy that ends up with you is going to be feeling like I hit the jackpot, because you have so much energy. You're so loving. You're so fun. You have so much to offer. And I think that is the one thing I want you to remember is when you meet the right guy, it's going to be the guy that is just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I get to be with you every day, that I get to have this much fun. Somebody that wants to travel and has that sense of adventure is rare. Most people are sitting comfortably, right, and they're not taking risks. And that's where confidence lies. So although this has been a rocky road for you in some aspects, you've gone into a lot of uncharted territory, which is building your confidence in the process and in what feels like it's messy and twists and turns, but getting more confident, you're building strength through the process. And eventually this relationship will, as my mom says, land the airplane. She was a flight attendant for 20 years. So, we have to land the airplane. You're at cruising altitude. You're coming in for the landing. You're going to decide, okay, am I going to get off this? Am I going to get off this airplane, or am I going to, I'm going to take it for another ride? Like, you're going to be able to have such a different perspective because you keep challenging yourself. You keep collecting data. You're listening to podcasts. And if you can detail out every flavor of the Gumball Guy like you did, I have nothing but confidence for you, because it's once you see it, you can't unsee it.
No, and that's the fascinating thing. And I think my therapist said this to me like a year ago. She's like, is he still attractive to you? And I'm like, yes. And I stood in front of him this morning and I thought, oh, huh. I was like, what? I kept looking at him. I was like, what is it that I liked about you? Like, I couldn't put my finger on it. I kept looking at him. I go, but what was it? What was it? And I was like, well, maybe it's COVID. Maybe he just like is like great. Like literally, I thought, well, maybe COVID didn't do him in. I was like, oh, maybe because he was tired because he did a film shoot yesterday, and during COVID, that's kind of hard around here. And I was just like, or maybe he's just becoming less attractive to me because it's like he's not growing.
Yes.
It's like he's stuck in the same place he was when I met him in 2019. And I don't feel like I'm stuck in that place anymore.
Yes. That's why I say, don't get so down on yourself. If you're with a guy and you're like, I shouldn't be with this guy. If you keep investing in yourself and you keep growing, eventually you do outgrow it. And then it's like, oh man, I'm kind of grossed out right now. And that's such a great place to be. Cause then you're like, I don't even want to. They're like, you want to hang out? And you're like, yeah, I actually really don't. And it's like, this is so awesome. I don't want to do it. This is great. I know. I mean, like, I've no ex where I'm like, hey, I really would like to see him again. Like, I fully grossed out by every single ex because I know I'm not missing out. I know there was nothing to offer. And so I remember having this period of single where I dated no one. I didn't do online dating. I know God was preparing me for the love of my life, but I had faith in that, but I still had to spend that period of time not really knowing that that's what was going on, but just having faith that, okay, I all of a sudden I didn't want to do online dating anymore. I was focused on building my business and I was just loving living in New York. And so we need to honor those places in our lives so that there will be a point where you outgrow this guy. Right. And the decision will get easier. You just have to keep investing in yourself, keep feeding your mind, your body with all the good things so that we don't get too caught up. And not that we should, give it too much time. Because,
right. I know.
You know what I'm saying? Don't give yourself too much grace, but we have to do it in a way where we're like, okay, I know I need to stop doing this. However, I've got to, what is the pathway out where I don't beat myself up in the process?
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Like I sort of love you, but I just, because when I looked at what you just said, I was thinking maybe my yeah, sure comment this morning was truly how I felt. I was like, whatever, but like, I'm not going to spend my whole day around it. Cause he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to go biking with this friend and I'm going to go do all these other things. And you're so right. And not beating myself up has actually been the greatest thing. Like I took pressure off myself. It's like, cause I kept thinking, well, the next time I see him, I have to dump him. The next time I see him, I have to like show him the door. And the next time I see him, I have to block him. And it's been so nice to just do what I want to do. It's like, well, I'm doing this podcast and the podcast has been sort of therapeutic in realizing the mistakes that I've made or the people that I chose. And like today I was like sending out things to authors that I want to connect with. And I was doing all these really positive things. And I wasn't even thinking about him. Like he left and I went to go do all the positive things. And until like I talked to you, I wasn't sitting around spinning and thinking about what he's thinking about me or whatever. And it's just interesting because I can see the growth. I'm not quite there. I'm going to be honest. And who knows when he gets here Saturday, I might be like, but I'm not quite there, but I can see it because he's not going to change. And I don't have no expectation of change. I don't think there's a magic wand or anything, but he's not going to change and that's okay. But I'm going to change.
And that's okay. Because trust me, I spent a lot of time looking at guys that I hoped would change. And I'm so glad they didn't, because when you meet the one you're really supposed to be with, you're like, oh, thank God.
I know.
It's so much nicer and so much easier and so much more peaceful. It's so wonderful. And I almost hate myself that I'm the person saying that because I used to get so annoyed by people like me saying these things. Oh, you found love. Okay. But
But it's
it's so
so
true.
true and it's so
Yes.
reaffirming. I mean, please continue speaking that because I do believe, like, I'm going to be honest. I mean, you have those older friends, people who are like, you'll never find anyone. I was thinking about it today. I went to the post office box to pick up my mail, for my job. And people were, I was thinking about the friends who are like, well, you got to find somebody right away because you're going to lose your looks or whatever it is. And I was walking down the street and all I could think of is, but I'm sure my guy's out there. I think he's out there now, probably walking his dog, but I have all the faith in the world that he's out there. And it's
Yes.
okay. Like, I don't need to meet him today. Maybe I'll meet him a year from now, maybe two. Like, I don't know, but I have so much faith that he's there.
Yes. And I started praying for my guy, but I didn't know who he was, but I just started praying for him. And there was something about praying for him, like, just hoping he had a good day and if he was going through any challenges. And I just started lifting him up in prayer. And then I started to get this feeling like, ooh, I'm praying for a real person because,
Right.
The person that you're going to be with is walking around and they're, having meals and
Right, exactly.
you know what I mean? Like they're
Exactly.
actually, they exist on planet Earth. And it's sort of like, oh, if I'm praying for them, then they become real and they are real. So that's also, if you really kind of meditate on that, like this guy is actually out there and he's real. And you start, I did start having positive expectation. And I don't know, I'm not into the whole manifesting thing, but I just think that we have to, and maybe I should be. It's just like, I don't know, people will say I manifested that. I don't quite understand all of that, but I think there's huge value in saying, I'm going to walk away from what is not good for me. And there will be a point where you're like, I know I need to walk away from this guy and there'll still be parts of you that want to stay, but then there'll be more of you that will have that strength to walk away. And there might be periods where it's tempting, periods where they text and you don't respond. And those are powerful moments when you're like, oh my gosh, I am not responding to the guy that I thought I could never resist. And I'm moving forward. It gets more and more empowering because then you become the standard of which you're seeking.
Right.
We don't want a guy that's hanging out with some girl he's not really into. We're not,
exactly.
We're not dreaming about, hey, if I really meet the right guy, I just kind of want him to be sort of in a weird relationship where he's not really into her, but he's kind of into her and they hang out, but they're not really in a relationship. It's really what I'm looking for. You're not looking for the situation you're in. You're like, I want a guy who's like confident. He's in his career. Like, what you're looking for. You want a guy ready for a relationship and he's open and he doesn't have a phone full of random chicks texting him from Tinder and multiple apps. Like, we kind of have to clean up a little bit and go, okay, what does it look like when I'm actually ready for the real thing? And it's different for all of us, but you're evolving so beautifully and naturally to that point.
It's so funny because I had exactly this thought. I was like, well, I was thinking to myself, like, what is going to be the evolution of getting rid of this guy? And I was like, but I can't meet somebody who's like, I was like, what'd you do Saturday night? Oh, well, this chick I'm sort of not really in. I was hanging out with her. Like, that would be such a turn off. Like, okay, so I can't be that person either. And, I hear that. But I truly think he's like probably just like walking his dog down the street and he's going to go home and he's going to like read a book and do all these things that I would do. And he's just, but he's just looking for that person and he doesn't need her, but he would love to have her.
Yes. Amen. What? Okay. So we have to end on that. That is so good. Okay. So you are doing all these projects. So where do you want people to find you, your podcast, all the things as the Skinny Confidential says, pimp yourself out. I love that.
So I'm let me say this. All of my handles are XO Jolie Moore. So whether it's Instagram or whatever, Twitter or Facebook or any of it. So it's XO Jolie Moore.
So JolieMoore, right?
Correct. Yes, okay. Absolutely. And then I have a podcast called 50 First Dates, which has turned into a bit of a confessional because I have not read the memoir that I wrote 2 years ago. And because I was writing it, I started it to entertain my friends, to be honest, because I'm a writer. So I just sent my friends like a weekend to like download. And my friends like, you write books, you can just have a memoir. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. But it's been so amazing to read back. Well, it's a little cringeworthy, but I can see the growth and I do appreciate that. I can't believe I put up with the things I put up with, but I can see the growth. And so if you're interested in that, it's called 50 First Dates with Jolie Moore. It's everywhere you can find podcasts. And then I'm also a romance author. I've written a number of books under Jolie Moore. They're everywhere, Amazon, all bookstores, and as well as audiobook and just at Jolie Moore.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for reaching out. This was such a fun conversation. I can't wait to hear what happens with you. So I'm going to keep in touch, and please let me know what happens with the rest of your story and books that you continue to write, all the projects. Girl, you are a blast. You're going to find love, and it's going to be your greatest adventure yet.
No, thank you so much for having me. And please keep doing what you're doing. I know it's hard to know, especially as an author, I know this, who you're reaching, because, I get like 1% of the emails from the, people who buy the books, but please keep doing what you're doing, because it touched me so. And it was it was just what I needed to hear. Like, I can't even tell you, it was just what I needed to hear when I needed to hear.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right. Have a great day. Thanks, Jolie.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want more information or to schedule a private coaching session, or better yet, to join the next Back to You Academy, go to gumballlove.com. If you loved this podcast, I would love for you to share it with your friends. And if you really loved it, a 5-star review is the best compliment you can give. Remember, you are enough, you are right where you should be, and the only thing you have to do is keep going. I'll leave you with my favorite quote by Henry David Thoreau. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams and live the life you have imagined. Until next time, I'll see you soon.